Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Orange and Brown Talk podcast. Dan Labbe, Mary Kay Cabot with you here on a Wednesday, recording this about 5:15. And we are going to continue talking about Todd Monken here today on the pod. Of course, Todd was introduced on Tuesday. We had a chance to talk a little bit about the quarterback situation yesterday. And of course, we talked about Jim Schwartz, but we're going to get into a little bit more about Todd, his offense, all of those things. And Mary Kay, you just put up a story at cleveland.com, sort of recapping the day, putting a bow on what Todd had to say, what other people had to say about Todd, all of that. He got emotional kind of right off the bat, even though he didn't want to. And the more you think about sort of Todd's journey, and the fact that it took him this long to get this opportunity, despite his resume as an offensive coach, when you get to be 59 years old, going to be 60 here soon, you start to wonder if this opportunity is going to come along. So I understand why this means so much to him. So as you've had some time to sort of think about yesterday and Todd and what everyone said about him, I guess where are you at right now with what we witnessed?
Well, I think that is the thing that really stood out to me is the fact that this does mean so much to him. And that is why he stood up there and just came to tears, because he knows that this could be his last chance, probably was going to be his last chance to become a head coach in the NFL, which he has dreamed about for so long. And I think the fact that that he is taking this to heart, I really do believe that he is going to put his heart and soul into this job. He's going to give it every single thing that he's got. He knows that basically this is it. I think he also knows that, that he has to do it his way. He's got to go up or down, fighting on his own merits. And he's going to have to tell it like it is. And I think he will do that. I think we saw that in that press conference yesterday, that he's unabashedly himself, that he will, if he needs to tell Andrew Berry, hey, I need another quarterback, then they'll go out and try to find him another quarterback or whatever it is. He has the authority to kind of reshape this offense or rebuild this offense from the ground up. He's got to rebuild the offensive line. He's got to rebuild the receiving corps to a degree, and he might have to rebuild the quarterback room. We don't know about that yet. But he has the resources to be able to do that. And I just think that he's going to really be able to look these guys in the eye and say, here is exactly what I need to get this job done. He's been around long enough to tell it like it is.
Yeah, and I thought one of the points he made was interesting that, look, the Browns are getting a better version of him now than they would have gotten 15 or 20 years ago. And so even though he kind of said at one point, like, look, if this would have just ended up, I'm an offensive coordinator the rest of my career, that's a pretty good job. You could do a lot worse than that. But obviously he's thrilled to have this job. But getting a veteran coach like this, getting a guy who's this experienced and again has that resume that we've talked about, you're getting a guy who's learned at every stop from guys like John Harbaugh, Kirby Smart, all the people that he's spent time with. Like you're not getting a young guy who's got to learn on the job. Like he's ready to go, and obviously, even though you've seen guys do it, sitting in that chair is different. And there are going to be some challenges that maybe he didn't expect, but it's going to be a lot less of a learning curve than it would be for a Grant Udinsky or a Nate Shieldhouse or any other young guy who's getting this job, or even a Kevin Stefanski when he first got in that chair. Todd's going to be ready to roll as far as the responsibilities of being a head coach.
Yeah, I think he is. And again, they all find out very quickly that it's a lot different to be a head coach in the NFL than it is to be a coordinator in the NFL, because every single thing stops at your desk. And I have said this before, and I truly believe this. 80% of the job is handling adversity. 80%. I believe it, because you are the one that has to put out all the fires. If somebody gets sick on Friday before the game and can't play, you have to figure that out. If an assistant coach's wife is having a baby on game day, you have to figure that out. If somebody gets arrested, if there are 4 losses in a row and the wheels are starting to come off, it all comes down to you and the buck stops at you. And he's already had a major piece of adversity heading into the job. And that is the fact that he doesn't know if his defensive coordinator is coming back or not. And it seems like he feels pretty prepared to move forward, even if he doesn't. But there are going to be repercussions of that if it happens like that. There will be players that are upset about that. There will be responsibilities that have to shift and change. So this is his first big challenge on the job. But as you mentioned before, this is not his first rodeo. He's been around for 37 years. He's seen a lot. Now, a lot of it, he's seen other people handling it. But he has been at least a head coach at one other point in his career at Southern Miss from 2013 to 2015. I think you do work some of the head coach kinks out and figure out the responsibilities of the whole job, even if you've only been a coach at that level. I do think that that is meaningful. So I think he will be able to handle a lot of the adversity that's going to come his way. But I think that even he will find that it's probably more than he's expecting at the outset.
Yeah, and while just going back to the way he addressed the Jim Schwartz thing on Tuesday, like I think it's sort of we know that Kevin would have addressed that very differently. You know, if he were dealing with the same situation, we know that he would have just addressed it differently. And I think Kevin probably would have taken more of the tact that Jimmy Haslam and Andrew Berry both took, which was to basically say, you know, this isn't a day to talk about Jim Schwartz. This is Todd Monken's day, right? I think so. It's just interesting to see that contrast. Whereas Todd kind of decided I'm going to be a little adversarial here and I'm going to send a message to whoever needs to hear that, whether that's Miles Garrett and Denzel Ward or the coaches that were standing in the back of that room or even us that were sitting there in that press conference, right? Like, or maybe even Andrew and Jimmy and JW. So he decided that he was going to take that tact. And I think that's sort of a look into how I think Todd is going to be very different from Kevin. Like, I don't think it's always going to be just, you know, we're keeping everything internal and I'm not going to explain things and I'm just going to keep everything bottled up. There could be some times where Todd decides, you know what, I'm going to say something because I think it needs to be said.
Well, Kevin was on a mission every single time he sat down at that microphone in front of us. His goal was to not create a headline. He wanted to keep the noise level very low coming from that chair. He did not, for the most part, he did not single out players for praise or criticism. He was very flatlining sitting up there in that chair, as everybody knows. And it used to drive people crazy. We didn't love it. We didn't love the fact that we could barely get anything out of him. It was refreshing to have the assistant coaches and the coordinators come and talk to us because they had plenty of colorful things to say about the players and about plays and things that happened the week before. Kevin was very dry by design. And it's not because he's not a good quote, because someday he will be on television and he will be amazing. He's a great quote, but he just didn't want to give us anything. Now, Todd will find out what his media style is going to be as he goes along. He might start out as a little bit of a loose cannon and then decide he wants to dial it back. Or he might start out as a little bit of a loose cannon and stay that way and just say, this is who I am. I think that people are usually best served by being themselves. I think you have to be yourself to the extent that you can. So we'll have to see how that goes. I think his media style will evolve over time, but I think the inclination for him is going to be to just tell it like it is and to wear his emotions on his sleeve and to just be honest and transparent. Now, the thing about that is that Cleveland is, I say it all the time, it's a very big small market. It's a very, very big small market. It plays big nationally. Everybody loves to get their hands on Cleveland Browns news. It's why the Nationals trip over themselves to find any little nugget they can about the Cleveland Browns because it moves the needle for some reason nationally. It just really does. So we'll have to see how this all plays out. but I think Todd will find out very quickly that maybe a quote that would have stayed in Baltimore when he was there, that's not how it's going to be here. If he has some kind of a quote that's, interesting, like I'm not chipping Jim Schwartz, that's going to blow up. That is going to blow up. That's how things go when you're talking about the Cleveland Browns, right? I mean, do you agree with me on that, Dan?
Oh yeah, as you were talking about that, I'm just thinking like something that he hasn't really had to do. And obviously, when he was coaching at Southern Miss, he had to do this, but that's just different. Like he hasn't had to walk out of that locker room 10 minutes after a gut punch of a loss and
Mhm.
stand at the podium and answer questions about like that is an emotional time. That is a really difficult time to have to do media and have to have cameras in front of you and stand at that podium and have questions asked. And it's hard on the players when we walk into the locker room after a game and it's a tough loss. So that's the other part of this. Like Kevin was always very composed. Todd is a pretty emotional guy. Like I'm curious what he's going to sound like after he has that first kind of really difficult loss where maybe something happened that wasn't his fault and he's getting asked about a bunch of stuff that wasn't his fault and how is he going to handle that stuff? That's what makes that job so hard.
Yes, and, as you mentioned, as a coordinator, you don't talk after games. It's not like you run into the coordinator in the locker room and you stop and talk to him for 10 minutes. That doesn't happen. So, he hasn't really had those moments really since he was at Southern Miss as the head coach. So, that will be interesting, to see how that all goes, but I'm very curious to see how he's going to handle, again, the fact that he has to talk every single day. There's a lot of margin for error there when you're talking every single day. And you also find out, how do you want to handle your sort of messaging to players through the media or not? Are you going to try to get your points across to some of your players through some of the things that you say in the media? Because coaches will do that. Jim Schwartz would occasionally do that, right? He would send a message to Miles Garrett through us saying, I think, he just got the big contract and now we expect him to be, let's aim for NFL MVP. I mean, he would do stuff like that. So it'll be interesting to see how transparent he wants to be on injuries, on if a guy's not playing well, are you going to kind of single a guy out a little bit or um, we're all going to be in this together, right? We're all going to learn each other together.
Right. And there's little things too, like, okay, so let's say we're sitting there in OTAs and Miles Garrett isn't there, as he usually isn't, and Todd gets asked about it. Like there's a certain way you have to address that. You can't stand behind a microphone and say, Miles really should be here. Because that could get you in trouble with the union. That could get you, you know what I mean? Like there's so many things you have to navigate like that. And I'm just thinking, your GM goes out and signs a guy like Isaiah Bond and the situation he was coming off of. Kevin Stefanski was the one who had to answer for that. Andrew Berry didn't come downstairs and talk to us after he signed him. So, how is Todd going to handle that stuff? It's just a completely different, when you're a coordinator, sometimes that stuff crops up if the timing is right based on when you're scheduled to talk. But to your point, when you're the head coach, you talk every single day. During the week, we talk to Kevin Wednesday, Friday, Sunday, Monday. That was the schedule with him. During training camp, you talk every day. During OTAs, mini camp, you talk most days. So you are the guy who messages for the entire organization. And again, it's this idea of you have to answer for decisions that weren't even your decisions sometimes. But they trade Joe Flacco after week 4, week 5, whatever that was. Andrew didn't come down and talk to us. Kevin Stefanski had to handle that. So how is Todd going to handle something like that? And even Kevin kind of got in a little hot water for how he phrased something, kind of saying that it was a surprise. And it was like, oh, that kind of took off a little bit. And it was pretty innocuous, but that's how this works. So that's what he has to adjust to and get used to.
Right. And one of the things about this football team and about Andrew Berry is that he is a general manager of second chances, right? I mean, we know that about him by now. He is going to take on players that have some kind of an issue, that have gotten in some kind of trouble. And there were a number of guys in that category just last year alone. And all of them, none of them got suspended by the NFL last year. None of them were arrested or charged with anything in the end, or convicted of anything. But he will take chances on these guys. And when you look ahead to this draft and this offseason again, there is a world in which some more of those kind of situations could take place on this football team. And you're right, Todd Monken is going to be the one that has to answer, for the most part, for those kinds of situations. So that's one of the things that he's going to have to kind of get that set in his mind, how he's going to deal with that. And then also, I've heard him say in some, I can't remember where I even heard him say this, but when he was talking about, you know, the whole play calling piece, and there will be things that happen on the sidelines and guys get into it and you have, situations or whatever. He seems pretty transparent about that kind of stuff. And he's not afraid to say, yeah, sure, there are going to be arguments sometimes. There are going to be disagreements. I don't think he's going to shy away from that stuff. And I think that's okay. Because if you just tell the truth about some of those things, they lose their power a little bit. Yeah, we butted heads a little bit on the sideline over there. Yes, we did. It was the heat of the moment. We're passionate about the game. We both want the same thing. We want to win, and we didn't agree on that call or whatever. And I think it's okay to show that kind of emotion and to be honest about some of the things that we're probably going to be seeing. And hey, we saw plenty of those things on the sidelines in 2019, right?
Yeah, there was a lot going on in 2019. But yeah, I mean, to your point, like, when Miles Garrett walks off the field and slams his helmet in New England, right? Or Jerry
Mm.
Jeudy gets into it with Shador Sanders. Those are things that happen. I mean, we've seen guys do that forever in the NFL. That happens. Sometimes the cameras capture it, sometimes they don't. And there's a lot that probably goes on in those buildings that we never even see or hear about between guys over things like that. So you've got to strike that balance between saying what you want to say and not saying too much, but you also can't be scared. And I do think with Kevin, going back to 2019, Kevin was kind of what they needed initially. Like they just needed somebody that, even Joel Bitonio, when I talked to him for a story, like I might have been in 2020, one of the things he said was like, we weren't going into the locker room and seeing something on our phone, something crazy that somebody in the front office or the head coach said, that day at training camp. Like they kind of needed that style. But I also think it got old. And I think this past year they could have used a little more honesty from the head coach, a little better messaging from Kevin Stefanski than what they were getting. And so I think Todd Monken, his style might be kind of what this organization needs to be the face of their franchise here moving forward.
Right. And I do think, and I know I've already said this, but I just really think that you do have to be yourself. And I think he's a good enough guy, and he's got a interesting enough personality and a great enough personality that being himself is going to play really well. I think it's going to work for him. And I think the players are going to see that he's genuine. I think the fans are going to see that he's genuine. I think he's willing to own mistakes. I think that's going to be important. I think he's probably going to admit, no, we should not have done such and such during the game. It didn't work out. Or, well, we practiced it. It worked out well in practice when we did it 22 times on Friday, and it just didn't go the way that we expected it to go, or whatever the case may be. Um, I think he's at least probably going to start out being very forthcoming. And I hope he is. I hope he is. Don't sanitize him. Don't do that. He's too colorful, and he's going to be fun to cover. Now, it's not always going to be pretty in the beginning. They're rebuilding the whole offense, and it's going to take some time. They've got to rebuild the offensive line, the receiving core, the quarterback room, perhaps. We don't know. So it's going to take a little bit of time. Although one good thing for him is that he really is bringing over so many guys from his staff. And I also saw that T. Martin got let go today by the Ravens. So I don't know if he'll end up here or not. Their quarterbacks coach. Now the Browns have already hired a quarterbacks coach, but maybe he finds a place for T. Martin. I don't know. But he is going to be surrounded by the guys that he feels comfortable with. And that's so vitally important because John Harbaugh thought he was getting those guys. He thought he was getting Todd Monken and his band of offensive assistants. And he did not get those guys. He's starting from scratch. So, in terms of Todd Monken and his staff and the messaging and the system and all of that, those guys are going to be on the same page because he's got his guys. Now, in terms of terminology and instilling all of that in the players, that's the part where it's going to be new and different for them. And what he's going to have to figure out is, does he change the terminology completely and install what he and his coaches use? Or does he try to modify it? Or does he keep what these guys have done? That will be a decision that he'll have to make. And we can ask him more about those things over the next few times that we have him coming up over the next few months.
Yeah, he didn't really want to get into a lot of specifics yesterday for obvious reasons, but we'll talk to him at the combine. We'll talk to him when they open the offseason program, all of that stuff. You guys will track him down at the owners' meetings, all that good stuff. So there's going to be a lot of opportunities here for Todd to kind of talk about some of those things. But let's dig into this offense a little bit. I've thought about this, Mary Kay, and I'm just going to warn you right now. I might become the annoying offensive line guy this offseason. I've always pushed back against anyone but a quarterback people in the draft. And by the way, like if they go through this process and they think like Ty Simpson is awesome and he's sitting there at 6 or whatever and they think he's worth it, of course you take him. So I'm not saying you in no situation do you take a quarterback, but I'm starting to think like if they could add, let's say, 2 offensive linemen in free agency and then another one at number 6, you could be in really good shape. And building the trenches is really boring, but I think Andrew likes to do that anyway. I think he likes to draft in the trenches early in the draft. So I think that could end up being their likely approach. But I sort of feel like this thing has to start with, and this not exclusively, obviously, but this thing has to start with really making sure that offensive line is set up to be successful, not just this year, but for the next 2, 3, 4 years. And that really kind of sets everything else in motion.
It really does. And definitely 100%. Andrew is all about doing that. He learned the hard way. He and Ryan Grigson working together in Indianapolis, Ryan had to figure out it's got to start there. If you're not protecting your quarterback and if you're not run blocking well, then forget it. You have to have a really good offensive line. So they know that that is vitally, vitally important. And a lot of their resources are going to go there. They do have a very good offensive line coach in George Warhop. He was here from 2009 to 2013. He coached, or do I have that right? No, I'm not. I'm not
Yeah,
sure.
it was. I think you're right. He spanned like 3 coaches.
Okay.
I think of Mangini, Shermer, and Chudzinski.
Yes. Okay. I think I have those years right. And he coached Joe Thomas all of those years, or most of those years. And yes, all of those years he coached Joe Thomas. And Joe Thomas made 4 first team all pros under George Warhop. And he made the Pro Bowl all 5 years. So George has been here. He knows what he's looking at. He knows how to acquire talent. He knows how to coach talent. That is a really, really good hire. I know he's so excited to be back here. I mean, I haven't talked to him yet, but I just know from seeing him at combines and things like that, how much he loved being here when he was in Cleveland. So I'm sure he's ecstatic to be back. And one of the things that I'm hoping that he does, and I've said this before, is I'm hoping that between Joe Thomas and George Warhop, that they can talk Joel into coming back. Now, that's probably a long shot because Joel, speaking of tears, shed tears on the last time we talked to him on locker cleanout day. And that was locker cleanout day, wasn't it, when he shed the tears? or was it
Yeah, it was locker cleanout day. It
locker cleanout
was
day?
yeah.
So there's a good chance that he's going to decide to hang it up, but you never know. When you get away from the season a little bit and and you let that body heal up, and then you start to look at what Todd Monken might bring to the table, and you start to look at what George Warhop might bring to the table, Joel just might be like, you know, I can squeeze one more year, at least one more year out of this body.
So it's funny you say that because just randomly I was thinking about this like yesterday and today that like, could Joel get talked into that one last ride, kind of that pay it forward, like we're transitioning to a new O line. There'll be some guys who are, maybe Tevin Jenkins is one of your starting guards, and DeJuan Jones will be in the mix somehow, probably battling for a job or something like this. So there'll be some returners, but we're going to bring in a couple young guys on that line. It's going to be a new look line. Joel, why don't you come back? We'll call it one, just say this is going to be it, your last year, and just be the guy who sort of, you know, pushes this thing forward now. You're going to be that bridge. You were here when these disappointing years, but now here's Todd Monken. Help Todd out, help George Warhop out, and just pay it forward to all these young guys. And when this team goes on to great heights, we'll look back and say, man, Joel Bitonio, it was so important when he came back that one year to help these young guys out.
I could see it. I could see it. I mean, it might take a little bit of coaxing, but it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world for him to come back for one more year. Joe Thomas has already told him, make sure you're ready to be done because there's nothing like this out there. Be done, drag yourself off the field. And I think that's what he should do. I mean, he played at a very high level last season. I think he played at a Pro Bowl level, and he was kind of holding the house of cards together, so to speak, with all of the injuries and the craziness going on around him. So it was even harder than in other years to play well because he had to kind of make up for some of the things going on around him. And he played very, very, very well. And again, I tweeted this the other day. They have to do alternates for defensive linemen and offensive linemen. It's not okay that those guys don't get to be added to Pro Bowls. That's not okay. That needs to change. This is not about going out and playing flag football. This is about honoring the greatness of the game and the great players in the game. And when you sit in the Hall of Fame room and deliberate on a player, those Pro Bowls matter and those all pros matter. So that's something that needs to be changed. Joel should have been, if anybody should have been going to the Pro Bowl as an alternate this year, it should have been Joel Bitonio. So that's my little soapbox on that.
Well, and it's not just that, it's money too for some of these guys,
Yeah.
right? Like incentives and things like that. It makes it harder for these O linemen and these D linemen to get some of those incentives or get some of that money that could be coming
Yes.
their way if they get named to a Pro Bowl too.
Yes. And I don't know how the players let this slip through that it happens like this, but I think the whole thing needs an overhaul, right? I mean, it needs an overhaul. I don't know. Did you watch the Pro Bowl last night? Did you watch the
Oh,
flag football game?
no, I didn't watch a second. I've seen clips on Twitter, but I didn't watch a second of it at all. Like I actually don't know the last time I've sat down and watched the Pro Bowl.
Well, I mean, it's so different now. I mean, it used to actually be a game. Now it's a
Yeah.
flag football game. And I couldn't bring myself to actually, I did watch a little bit of it, but like, I just couldn't with a straight face sit down at the computer and try to write something off of a flag
Right.
football game. Right. I mean, it was like,
Right. It
I,
doesn't mean anything.
I couldn't do it. But nonetheless, that needs reform. That needs reform. But Joel, let's see if George Warhop can perhaps have a conversation with him. But I would think that Joel would be excited about what he heard from Todd Monken yesterday. I think he would be excited about this.
Yeah, and I bet they're gonna be a little bit of a just kind of based on what it's gonna look like with what they have at quarterback, and if we're talking about a bunch of young receivers, stuff like that, this might be they might kind of be a physical run the football team. That's sort of what was promised to us last year, and it never really quite hit. But I'm sure Todd loves what he sees from Quinshon Judkins, and they've got, Dylan Sampson, who is kind of a nice versatile back. I'm sure they'll add some pieces there. I actually thought Rocket Sanders looked good in his limited time last year. So, I think that for an offensive lineman, they love to run block and they love to do that stuff. And if, they're saying, look, we're going to try and be that Baltimore was always a physical running team, even when they kind of, even when they were putting up big passing numbers, it was still kind of about that physicality and big personnel and all that stuff. So, yeah, I'm sure Todd's looking at this and saying, this is our best path forward. So come on, Joel, come back and be a road grader.
Yeah, and then the other thing to consider when you're talking about the style of quarterback that Todd wants to use, if he can find a mobile quarterback, and he's got Deshaun Watson in the room. I mean, all those guys in the room are actually mobile, some more than others, right? I mean, Shador can extend plays. He proved that. Deshaun is more of a running quarterback. Dylan's got mobility. Um, when you have a quarterback that can get away from pressure, that's different than if you have a statue back there, right? It changes up how you have to block, obviously, for that quarterback. So if you have a running quarterback that's getting the heck away from trouble, now of course those guys hang out of the ball longer too, and that's a whole nother set of issues. But for the most part, if you have a mobile quarterback, they should be able to build a really nice offensive line that can be successful this year with what they have already, and with George Warhop coaching them, and with their draft picks and free agency and all that. I think they'll be okay on the line.
Well, yeah, and that's sort of the beauty of this, right? Like there is a path forward for this team. I mean, that's sort of what we've been saying, even when it's felt bleak. They do have a path forward, and this year in particular. I mean, like I said, I would certainly endorse taking an O lineman at 6 if all things are equal between the players available, and there isn't a quarterback that you think is the guy there. But you could do O line at 6, or if you trade down, which is probably a possibility, at 9 or something like that. And then you could take a receiver at 24, and maybe you could get one of these quarterbacks who was supposed to be taken higher coming into this year, but just didn't have the year they were supposed to. Take a quarterback at 39 and another wide receiver. It's like they have so many options, and they're going to have some money to spend. Andrew will find a way to free up some dollars. So they have options to sort of add young talent and, talent guys who are kind of in their mid 20s going into their second contract, add a guy or two like that. They can add some real pieces here, and they can they kind of have their cake and eat it too a little bit with the idea of rebuilding the line, but also stockpiling some real weapons on the outside too.
Right. And I know that they are going to try to get Jerry Jeudy back on track. So for the people that wonder what the future of Jerry Jeudy is, unless something changes, Jerry Jeudy is going to be here. And the goal and the hope is that they can get Jerry Jeudy back on track and get him back to that 1,000-yard Pro Bowl level again. Now, I mean, can it be done? I think it can be done. I think it can be done. So that's something that they're going to definitely work on in the offseason, and make sure that they have, him basically ready to go and be productive. But they can't leave themselves short in the pass catching realm. They've got to bring in some really good competition. I think they need at least 2 or 3 guys in that pass catching realm challenging for the Pro Bowl this coming year, or all pro level. So you've got Harold. That's good. And then you've got Jerry. Can they get him back up and running again? But I think you have to add like 2 more guys to that. And I do have to wonder, will Andrew Berry go back at the Brandon Ayuk situation? We know he's basically done with the 49ers. And in the right environment, can you get the most out of him? And would he buy into the program and all those kinds of things? I mean, when you're assembling a team and assembling your roster, you have to think of personalities and leadership and all of that kind of stuff. But Andrew likes to go back at some guys that he has pursued in the past and Brandon Ayuk is one of those players.
Yeah, and just I keep thinking this with Jerry. He's going to be 27 in April. Like he's it's not unthinkable that he can at least be, even if he's not the guy he was a couple years ago, that he can at least still be a good productive receiver for this team. Like last year stunk for a lot of people. So put it behind you and move on. And then with Ayuk, if they would have hired a young guy, I would have said, no way. You don't bring that on to your first time head coach, a guy who maybe has never been a coordinator, who hasn't been a coordinator for very long. But now if you're hiring Todd Monken, who's been in Baltimore and has dealt with some different personalities and has had a whole career dealing with different personalities, like, maybe you do look at a Brandon Ayuk. Maybe you would at least kick the tires on an AJ Brown, or someone who you might need to do a little cajoling with if they aren't happy they aren't getting the football, things like that. So you'd maybe be more willing to bring in some different personality types because you have a 60-year-old head coach who's kind of seen everything.
Absolutely. And he has spent some time as a wide receivers coach. His first job in the NFL was as wide receivers coach of the Jacksonville Jaguars, and he spent 4 years doing that. And much of his college experience was as a receivers coach, in addition to, pass game coordinator, offensive coordinator. He spent a lot of time with receivers. So I think that is really, really going to serve him well as they try to reshape and retool the pass receiving core. So I think that will help him a lot. But I do think that he is somebody that could handle some of the stronger personalities that end up in receiver rooms. And remember, when he was here in 2019, he had Odell Beckham Jr. and Jarvis Landry. And those guys weren't difficult personalities, but they're strong personalities. They were strong personalities, and there was a lot of dysfunction going on around them. And Todd Monken was the one who kind of had to try to hold that together. I remember those two guys felt that the quarterback room with Freddie and Baker Mayfield and the quarterback's coach, Ryan Lindley, and that room, they did not feel connected to that room, and it was very upsetting to them. And they went to Todd. They had him try to bring everybody together for a meeting. So he's been through a lot of these situations before, and I think he can handle some of the more challenging personalities. But I also think that we shouldn't, not we, they shouldn't put too many challenging situations on his plate from a roster personality standpoint. You don't need way too much noise on your roster.
Yeah, especially with to use the Andrew Berry term, with where the roster is in its life cycle, right? Like
Yeah.
if you're going to bring in a guy, you've got to think not just how does he help you this year? Is he going to be a part of this and be a positive force on this team for 2 years, 3 years, like you're trying to build this thing, not that they're tanking this year. They're going to try and win as many games as they can. But you're also thinking like, we're trying to, what you always call Super Bowl window 2.0. We're
Mhm.
trying to open up this window and keep it open for 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. And, if you, so you're not just looking at guys as like, well, let's bring in AJ Brown and try and win as many games as we can this year with AJ Brown. You're thinking, how does he help us this year? But how does he also help us in 2 years, 3 years, 4 years down the road?
Right. And so that is one area of concern and something to really keep an eye on. But the other one, of course, and the biggest one, is the fact that Todd Monken could find himself with a very heated quarterback competition on his hands, a very heated one, right? Because Shador is going to come in here and he's going to believe that he deserves to be QB1 from the jump. And Deshaun Watson is going to come in here and believe that he deserves to be QB1 from the jump. And we don't know if they are bringing anybody else in, if they're going to try to sign a Malik Willis, which I think they should. I mean, the more the merrier. I mean, add to the pile and see what you have. You can always trade somebody, whatever. But, he might find himself with a pretty heated and potentially controversial battle on his hands at quarterback. And quarterback competitions can sometimes divide a football team. They can divide a fan base. They can divide a coaching staff. They can raise questions in a front office. And of course, when you're dealing with a Shador Sanders and he's brings so much attention to the Browns, to himself, it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. We know a little bit about what that's all about, but now he's coming in having started 7 games. It's completely different than when he came into training camp last year. He's the fourth string quarterback. There was nothing he could do about that. I mean, he didn't have anything to go on. But now he's got some film, he's got some tape, he's feeling good about himself, and he's going to want to make sure that he ends up as the starting quarterback of the Cleveland Browns. But so is Deshaun. So I don't know. It could get interesting,
Welcome to the head coach chair,
right?
Todd Monken. All right. That'll do it for this edition of the Orange and Brown Talk podcast. Make sure you're subscribed on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And of course, find our YouTube channel, Cleveland Browns, on cleveland.com. You click over to that podcast tab there. You can see all of our podcasts on video as well. And if you're not following us on our socials, Orange and Brown Talk on Twitter and Orange and Brown Talk on Instagram. Mary Kay, I'll talk to you later.
Sounds great.